Welcome. In this quietness beneath the moon, in the lobby of the Peoria Riverfront Museum, on behalf of the Board of Directors, we welcome those sharing with us this recollection live and in person, as well as through digital streaming media. Today is, in some ways, an unbelievable 20-year moment of recollection. So many of us this morning listening to the names being read at the Twin Towers, in that field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, at the Pentagon. Here at the Peoria Riverfront Museum, we are a place of art and science and history and achievement. And in that history pillar, we realize while this is still fresh and real to the families of the 2,977 lives lost that day, for 1/3 of Americans who are under the age of 25, they do not have a recollection of where they were that day. This moment has also become history. And here at the museum, we believe, like so many millions of others, we must never forget this moment. And as it moves into history, the museum believes we should help tell the story. We are joined today by two very important guests and longtime personal friends of mine, John and Julie Chan, the parents of Charles Chip Chan, the only Peoria native to perish on September 11th, 2001. Chip Chan is remembered by his family and his friends and his loved ones to this day, a Richwoods High School alumnus, a graduate of the University of Illinois. He went off to the dream job at Cantor Fitzgerald, the very prestigious investment firm located at the 105th floor of the North Tower. He went to work with a view like nobody else had, across the water to the Statue of Liberty, to the most populous city in the great city of New York, to live the dream. His spirit is still with us here in Peoria, and as his parents can attest, I call them every year on this day to tell them my prayers are with them. And to be with them today on this 20th anniversary in the presence of a very special guest, Ray LaHood, and all of you, is a special moment. So today we remember all of the victims. We remember the 6,000 who were injured that day. We remember the 16,000 who suffered long-term effects from rescue efforts. We remember the millions of us who were impacted by that day. And we remember this, that the spirit of this nation endured the greatest tribute to Chip Chan is what we do today here in this community and this museum. We carry on with the American spirit of opportunity and freedom. So help me now in a prayerful and somber moment to join with the Chans and with Ray LaHood, who I'll ask to help, to simply lay the wreath between these flags, the American flag and our own community of the state of Illinois flag, as we remember Charles Chip Chan and the victims of 9/11 20 years ago. Shall we lay the wreath? We will never forget. At this time, to look at history together, I invite someone we all know, a native of Peoria himself, a man who served 14 years in the United States Congress, representing the 18th Congressional District of Illinois, including Peoria and many other communities, a district once represented by Abraham Lincoln, and a man who would later go on to be the Secretary of Transportation for the U.S., Ray LaHood. Ray was there at the U.S. Capitol building on September 11th, 2001. And to have a discussion about that and his role in the memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and other observations, please help me welcome for a conversation Secretary Ray LaHood. I'm going to use them. So, Secretary LaHood, Ray, as we all know you locally. Let's start with that dramatic moment, the United States Capitol. Where were you on 9/11?
Well, John, first of all, let me say thank you to you and your staff for honoring the memory of Chip and his family, and also for this opportunity to visit about a very extraordinary day, maybe the most extraordinary day in the 240-year history of our country. The museum has really become the focal point for many, many activities, and thanks to your leadership and the leadership of your entire team, again, you really help us in the community highlight what took place. On 9/11, I had arrived at my office very early. I was in the Longworth building then, and maybe around 7 or 7:30, and a couple of our staff were there, and the television was on, and we saw the first plane hit the tower, and thought it was very, very odd. And also that day I was asked to be Speaker Pro Tem, where we preside over the proceedings of the House. And so I left my office and walked across the street, and it was an absolutely spectacular day in D.C., a beautiful day, not unlike the day that we have here in Peoria. And as I was walking towards the Capitol, I saw a plane kind of flying around the Capitol, which was very odd. And the reason it's odd is there really is no airspace around the Capitol or the White House that an airplane is allowed to fly. And as I came into the Capitol Hill Police were yelling at everyone to get out of the Capitol, and they were saying, "Get out, we think that there is a plane coming to hit the Capitol." So we all gathered out on the front lawn. Our cell phones, which then were flip phones back in the day, and really there was no social media at all back during that time. Maybe a little bit, but nothing that people could really use to communicate. So our communication was cut off, our ability to call our office, our ability to call our families. And we stood out on the front lawn of the Capitol probably for 2 or 3 hours getting information from the Capitol Hill police who were there with us. And then about an hour after we were there, we heard the sonic boom that reverberated all over Washington, D.C., and that was when the plane hit the Pentagon. And that plane really was targeting the White House. And because the White House sits down so low, the plane obviously missed its target and circled and vectored over to the Pentagon, which is a very large building, a very exposed building. People see it when they fly into Washington along the Potomac River. And that sonic boom was that plane hitting the Pentagon, and 140 people perished. Not only the ones that were on the plane, but a number of people that were working in the Pentagon. And then we saw the plume of black smoke across the city of Washington for several hours, and the Capitol Hill police told us what happened. So, and then we stayed for a while longer on the front lawn, and then we were told really we should go back to our, I happened to have an apartment in Washington then, and I went back to my office, and our staff left, and we all left. And the following day, though, and this is important to note, because this was a show of unity for our country. The following day, we were told by our leadership offices that if you're still in Washington, which everyone was because they couldn't leave, come to the Capitol steps on the Senate side and gather. So all of the senators that were there and all of the House members that were there, we gathered on the Capitol steps. Speaker Hastert spoke, Majority Leader Tom Daschle spoke, Minority Leader Trent Lott spoke, and Minority Leader Dick Gephardt spoke. And talked about unity and talked more about the idea that Congress was not going to leave Washington. We were going back into session. We were not going to stop doing our business. We were not going to be put in our place by any terrorist attack. And as soon as the speeches were over, the entire group, spontaneously, House members, Senate members, broke out and started singing "God Bless America." And that was a signal, I think, to the country that America is going to stand together and stand against what just happened, and we were going to move forward.
That's a famous recollection, and I've heard it a few times
Right.
in the media this week. Where did that take place?
On the steps of on the Senate side. There's actually two sides to the Capitol. The Capitol's in the middle, and then there's the House side, and it took place on the steps of on the Senate side.
Spontaneous singing
Right.
of "God Bless America,"
Right.
bipartisan.
Exactly, and a great signal.
You know, the late Robert H. Michael, who you succeeded
Right,
in the
right.
Congress, a singer himself,
Right.
would have loved the moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
The unity that it represented immediately, and the spirit of
Right.
the country that really has endured with all of our cantankerous, constant
Right.
American
Right.
debate and where we are now.
Right,
And that
right.
when we look at it historically, it's an amazing thing what happened in that moment.
Right.
That the United States Congress,
Totally.
the people's representatives, said, we're not going anywhere.
Right. And that really, I think, represented America. I think it was a signal that America was together.
Fast forward a few years, to your role as a cabinet member in the United States Secretary of Transportation, the role that you played in one of the memorials, and there's so many memorials
Right.
across the nation, and 3 of those at the locations where those 4 planes at the hands of 19 suicidal terrorists went down. But one that is probably the least visited, but one of the most impactful places, is on a field in Shanksville, the plane that was headed for you and the U.S. Capitol building
Right.
that never got there because of an incredible act of bravery on the part of the passengers. You helped dedicate and were part of that memorial. Can you talk about that?
Well, part of what the Congress and the Bush administration really wanted to do was memorialize these events. And so after a lot of debate, and the people of Pennsylvania and the Congress and the congressional delegation decided that there would be a memorial at Shanksville. And today, as a matter of fact, President Bush is there speaking, along with Vice President Harris. The 2 of them are speaking there. And what happened was, obviously, these memorials are not inexpensive, and so Congress came up with some money. This now is a part of the Department of Interior. It's like a U.S. Department of Interior memorial. And so our government put in a significant amount of money. The state of Pennsylvania put in a significant amount of money. Part of our responsibility at DOT was to help them with the infrastructure. And so our part was really to provide several $1 million for the infrastructure. And I had the privilege of traveling there with Vice President Biden during the time that I was secretary, and being a part of a memorial service. I don't remember exactly which one it was. But it's a very quiet place. It's a magnificent place, and it really honors those Americans who were on the plane, who saved us from another disaster in Washington, D.C. by the courage that they showed to commandeer the plane away from the terrorists. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that any of them were pilots and had the ability really to bring the plane down, except for the fact that it crashed and everyone perished. And that's really what is memorialized there. The heroism, the fact that they probably saved a lot of lives if that plane had ended up in Washington and crashed into the Capitol or some other building there in Washington, D.C. And it also, I think, connects rural America. If you go to Shanksville, it's in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. And for the people that live there and the people that experienced what happened, it really, part of the idea is that rural America was a part of
it could not be any more different
than New York or Washington.
Downtown New York's
right.
The presence of the tallest building in
Exactly.
North America,
Exactly.
1,776 feet tall, now Freedom Tower. You and I have both been several times to New York City's 9/11, and in the presence of the Chans, John and Julie, I would like to talk a little bit about what both of us have done, which is to visit the inscription. But can you describe those memorials and what they mean to you?
Again, a lot of debate went on about how are we going to memorialize what happened on 9/11, particularly in New York, where the major attack took place, where more Americans were killed than any other place, certainly more than the defense, the Pentagon, and Shanksville. And there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of debate in New York. There was a lot of debate in Washington. Ultimately, the Port Authority of New York was given the jurisdiction to hire the architects and hire the people that were going to really develop the kind of memorial that would be there. And so we worked closely with the Port Authority of New York, because obviously this was a very costly memorial. A lot of the money was donated by wealthy people in New York, but wealthy people around the country. But some of the money came from our government, not only New York government, but Washington, D.C. And so we were a part of that in the sense that, again, we provided millions of dollars for part of the infrastructure around the memorial. So we had a wonderful opportunity to...
What is the thing when you visited the completed memorial, those two sunken squares, fountain flowing, where you cannot actually see down into the full... What's the one thing you remember most about the visit to those memorials?
The solemnness, the quietness, and the fact that they wanted to recognize every person who perished, whether they were in the buildings or whether they were first responders. And they did it in such a beautiful way, just by simply placing their name on the granite. And they also did it in a way that when you go there, you can get a guide so that you know exactly, if you know the name of the person or persons. It was so well done that you don't have to. You can spend a lot of time, but you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to find the people that you really are trying to seek out. And
each of the engraved names, which stand about 4 inches tall, actually are holes through the plate of stone.
Exactly.
And you can place a flower or some item down into each of the names.
Exactly.
It's so beautifully done.
And if you watch the coverage on television today, there are hundreds of people there, family members and others, that are placing flowers all along the granite there. And then, the waterfall is quite magnificent also and beautiful. And it's so well done, so done in a way that really reflects and respects the lives of the people that perished that day. And it's, it's done right on the site.
The exact footprints of the two
exactly.
towers. Beautiful. There's one aspect, I'm sure you saw this, there's these grove of trees, and there's one tree that has around it a railing, and I had read about this, but visiting it is incredible. It was a tree that an arborist actually recovered from all of the disaster and brought it back to its fullness. And they call it the survivor tree, and it stands there around, it is encircled by for all of us, Ray, 20 years later, is still fresh. I was on a call yesterday with somebody who was in New York, who now is with the Art Bridges Foundation that we work with here, Paul Provost, and the emotion that just came pouring back. He worked for Christie's at the time, and in New York, just the unbelievable, unthinkable of, he said the gurneys lined all up and down the streets with no ambulances. When you think back on the days immediately after 9/11, Ray, I remember you giving some talks about the little snippets of personalizing each victim's story that were run in newspapers, and how personalized it was for you as a representative of our district. What do you remember most about coming back from this moment, the recovery and the way we faced it? It's certainly 20 years.
The thing for me is that I was serving on the Intelligence Committee prior to 9/11, and I was stunned by the fact that we did not know that these terrorists were in America, in Florida, taking flying lessons, being paid by bin Laden, and planning this attack. And I think everyone was stunned by that. And following the 9/11 incidents that took place, the Intelligence Committee met on an almost daily basis. And the thing that came out of that really was the idea, there was a big debate about who's going to do the investigation, who's going to do the postmortem, who's going to really study what happened and why it happened. And finally it was decided that the two intelligence committees, the House and the Senate, and the House of which I was a member, and so we spent 6 months interviewing people, taking testimony from people like Mayor Giuliani and the FBI director and the CIA director. And we put out some very strong recommendations and some very strong conclusions. But the bottom line was our intelligence community didn't know about it. They knew there might be an attack, but they had no specifics. And so a lot of legislation developed after that, the formation of the Department of Homeland Security, putting 22 agencies together that didn't exist. And everyone recognized that you could go to an airport, get on an airplane 10 minutes before the plane was going to take off. Those days are gone. TSA was formed. People now feel safe flying on an airplane. So a lot of those things developed in our government and still exist. The formation of an agency that has jurisdiction over the CIA and the National Security Agency and the FBI was put together. And a lot of debate about people's rights and is the government now going to get too intrusive and so forth. So a number of good things came about as a result of that. And obviously there's been a lot of debate about, here we are leaving Afghanistan after 20 years. And why did we go into Afghanistan? We went in there to get bin Laden, and we got him. And so you have to give, I think the way that President Obama handled that and the way that he allowed the military to handle it and turned out very well for our country. And so many things have happened since 9/11 and over the last 20 years, but I think really commemorating the memory of those that were lost. And I think the other thing that it did for America, it gave a new definition to first responders. People had no idea that first responders went into the building, and while the building was falling down, and rescued people and gave of their own lives and are still feeling the effects of that today. It gave a new definition for Americans about what sacrifices first
responders go through.
Absolutely.
I think that's a very good point. I think post 9/11, first responders nationwide of all kinds, similar to what healthcare workers, the respect that we are now reignited, the respect we have for healthcare workers.
Right.
This week, in fact, here at the Peoria Riverfront Museum, we've dedicated to first responders and their families. Steve Jackson, our board chair, has underwritten the cost to come through the museum and so forth. But it's just one of thousands of ways in which first responders are, I think, acknowledged differently today. So, well, Ray, and thank you, first of all, for all you do with us here at the museum and for coming down today to reflect on this important moment in history. I know, is there any parting thought about the future of what we need to do to never forget? We have the memorials, we have things like this here at our museum locally, we have people to tell the stories, but we also have an increasing number of people of our population who do not remember the moment. They weren't alive. So what must we do to keep the memory of these victims and of the fragility of our freedom alive?
Yeah, I think that really now it's incumbent upon our educational institutions to make sure that when the history books are written and when the history lessons are taught, that this is as much a part of the history of America as Pearl Harbor, as other major incidents that have taken place, and that there's a real understanding of the sacrifice that people made after 9/11 and how important a part of our history this really is. And I think it will be incumbent upon educational institutions like the museum and like our schools and like higher education to really, this has to become a big part of what we're teaching young people today.
It is now history. Well, for those present with us and for those online watching, on behalf of the board of the museum, Ray LaHood, thank you so much for joining. A special final thought in the presence of John and Julie Chan. We will never forget your son, Chip Chan. We will never forget his spirit. We will never forget his proud representation of Peoria, Illinois. And to us, he symbolizes the best of this great country and this great community, and we're honored by your presence today. God bless you. May God bless our great country, and God bless the memory of Chip Chan. Thanks for joining us today.